We've seen that the work of the third angel is to select and seal. We've addressed that issue. Hopefully we've come to some level of understanding about Ezekiel chapter 9. And we've tried to address the issue of Matthew 13 when it comes to the reign and the ability of the servants to be able to discern between the wheat and the tares. So I want to go back to some of the material that we were studying at the beginning. Just going to read from Review and Herald, January the 10th, 1882. It's one we've already read before. Unless anybody's got any more questions on this, we'll probably still come back to it in a cycle, but hopefully it was all clear. Review and Herald, January the 10th, 1882, paragraph 1. The nature of man is threefold, and the training enjoined by Solomon comprehends the right development of the physical, intellectual and moral powers. So we've addressed this issue of the threefold nature, and it's intellectual, moral and physical. In this passage, Ellen White doesn't put it in this order. She puts it the physical, intellectual and moral, and I think what she's trying to do is guide us into a state from lower to higher powers in importance. So I think she's marking that out for us. Then we want to go back to Adventist Home, 127, paragraph 2. Adventist Home, 127, paragraph 2. The lower passions have their seat in the body and work through it. The words flesh, fleshly or carnal lusts embrace the lower corrupt nature. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. We are commanded to crucify the flesh with the affections and lusts. How shall we do it? Shall we inflict pain on the body? No, but put to death the temptation to sin. The corrupt thought is to be expelled. Every thought is to be brought into captivity to Jesus Christ. All animal propensities are to be subjected to the higher powers of the soul. The love of God must reign supreme. Christ must occupy an undivided throne. Our bodies are to be regarded as his purchased possession. The members of the body are to become the instruments of righteousness. I think, as I've already expressed, there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion about the nature of a human being. And if we're going to consider the threefold nature as intellectual, moral and physical, based just upon this passage, I know there are many other quotes that people come up with, and some of them seem to mitigate against what I'm teaching or I'm suggesting, that she's going to say, and I believe she's quoting from Paul mostly, the words flesh, fleshly or carnal lusts embrace the lower corrupt nature, and the flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. So she's marking three things. What are we saying about the physical? I'm saying it's not the body. So the fact that nobody answered means that maybe you don't all agree with that. It takes a lot to, I think, a lot of undoing of preconceived ideas to accept this.
I think part of the reason I'm able to see that clearly is when you read the passage there, it says, are we supposed to inflict pain on the body then? And she says no. And then it talks about us being able to take the corrupt thought is to be expelled. So
I think the reason why people have difficulty in this is because after 6,000 years of sin, the chemical nature of our body, the way our nerves work, the electrical impulses, what we eat has an impact upon who and what we are. I think we all know that. And I think that's why people struggle. Any other thoughts?
There's a quote that says if you can overcome your diet, you can overcome every besetting sin. So it's a big deal.
When you say it's a big deal, what is the big deal?
That quote says it. That's a big deal.
What?
If you can overcome your diet, you can overcome every besetting sin.
I mean, in the context of this study, I mean. I understand the passage itself.
I didn't put the correlation. I'm just saying
Oh, okay.
That's a big deal, the diet, when you were just saying that.
Let's go to Mark 7:19. No, sorry, Matthew 15:17. Let me just check. I think they're the same passage. Yeah, they're the same passage. We'll probably read both of them. Matthew 15, 15:17. We might have to go back a few verses. We'll pick up from verse 15, 15:15. Then answered Peter and said unto him, Declare unto us this parable. Jesus said, Are ye also yet without understanding? Do not ye yet understand that whatsoever entereth in at the mouth goeth into the belly, and is cast out into the draught? But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashen hands defileth not a man. What's it talking about here? Sorry?
What people say, what comes out of their mouth, their conversations, their...
As opposed to?
Suppose he's not talking about the food they're eating, he's talking about, it's not what you eat that defiles you, it's what comes out of you.
Okay, let's just back up a few verses. I've seen your hand, Elder Jeff. I just want to, just wondering how far to go. Let's go to verse 10. And he called the multitude and said unto them, Hear and understand, not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. And then they have this discussion. The similar one is in Mark chapter 7, verse 19, which we may or may not read. Elder Jeff, you had a... Did you have
I
a
was
hand?
just saying, it's talking about what defiles you, and it comes from the higher nature, the heart, not your lower nature. It's not the flesh that defiles you. It's what proceeds out of your higher nature, which includes your heart and your intellect. We're talking about sin.
So we just read Matthew 15:17, that was the main verse, and then it's Mark 7:19. 15:17 and 7:19. We'll go to Mark. We'll pick up from verse 14. 7:14. And when he had called all the people unto him, he said unto them, Hearken unto me, every one of you, and understand. There is nothing from without a man that entereth into him can defile him. But the things which come out of him, these are they which defile the man. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And and when he was entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. So obviously this is a parable that he's speaking of. And he said unto them, Are ye so without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him, because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the draught, purging all meats? And he said, That which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. So, I'm not going to go to any Spirit of Prophecy quotes, but I think we know that Ellen White, really in a simple way, actually mitigates against what Jesus is saying there. Doesn't she? Sister Terry? Or how do you understand that, maybe?
Controversy on what they were eating is that they were eating with unwashed hands.
Okay, so yeah, they're saying that the issue is whether or not you wash your hands or not.
Huge superstitions attached with the washing.
So what's Jesus saying when he says it's not what you eat, it's what you say that makes you defiled? Is he saying you can eat anything? I don't mean, unclean foods or whatever, because they've already got that strict regulation, but just generally, it doesn't matter what you eat, it doesn't affect you.
What did you just say?
What you eat doesn't affect your character or who you are and what you are.
You can't use one saying of the Savior to destroy another, and we're told that what we eat affects our mind.
So how do we understand this passage? Sorry?
It's a parable.
What is the parable? What's the explanation of the parable? Because he explains it from verse 18 onward. Are you so without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him? Is that talking about food cannot defile you?
If I'm understanding it correctly, is the heart is like the thoughts or the feelings. So the food being, I guess the word that came to mind was something along the lines of debt, not necessarily having an effect per se on those thoughts or feelings. And not like the things that come from within, the foolishness, the adulterousness, the blasphemy.
Bob?
I see this issue having to do with thoughts. All the way around it has to do with thoughts. And because in 127, Adventist on 127 paragraph 2, it says the corrupt thought is to be expelled. And when Jesus was even on the mount talking to the people, he says, if you've lusted after someone, you've already committed adultery. If you've thought evil against your brother, you've already committed murder. So it really has to do with the thoughts. That's, I don't know where you're taking us, but it has to do with the thoughts.
Sister Tamina?
The way how I understand it is that the Jews had so many rules and customs that if you break one of them, for example, not washing your hands, you defiled yourself. But Mark here is saying, or Jesus is saying basically, those things don't defile you. It's the things, your heart, like your spiritual, what you have. That's what defiles you, and not all these customs, traditions, if you break them.
Okay, so is this a council on diet reform? No one believes that? or should I say lack of diet reform, because he says it doesn't matter, he's saying it doesn't matter what you eat, it will not defile you.
If you don't have good inside, then what you eat isn't going to make that much of a difference, is how I read it.
What did Jeff?
It's a counsel on what defiles man. Is it the lower nature or the higher nature that defiles man?
So when you say, what are you defining lower nature as?
The emotional system, which of itself cannot sin.
Okay, but he's talking about the body here, and he's saying if you eat something, that food will not defile you. Do we think that food defiles us? I guess that's my question, Brother Nathan.
I guess the Lord, Christ is trying to give him a lesson on the nature of man in the subject, trying to wipe away the preconceived ideas that were placed there by the Pharisees as to what defiles a man. So he's trying to show them that, that instead of looking from without, they need to be looking from within.
Okay, so let me ask this question. I've seen two hands up. If you have a meal and you eat fruit and vegetables at the same time, sorry? It's bad news. Okay, so if you eat fruit and vegetables at the same time, are you defiling your body?
Counseled not to.
Yeah, that's why I know we're counselled not to. I'm asking, if you did that, would you defile, let me rephrase that, not defile your body, would you become defiled? Let me rephrase it that way.
What's the definition of defile?
A dictionary, let's pull up a dictionary definition then.
To make or consider profane. Yeah.
Profane, that means when God looks at you, it's sinful, it's unclean. He looks at you as something that's wrong, that's not good. If you're defiled, there's either something that's holy, set apart for good use, or something that's just corrupt. So when God looks at you, then you have become alienated against him. Maybe, I think that's what I would understand defiled is. Sister Shamila, then Brother Mario, then Elder Jeff.
Someone already said this, but the difference between the spiritual and temporal, so Christ is drawing a line between the spiritual, what is the spiritual and what is not, so the temporal.
Okay, so does that answer what I'm asking? If you eat fruits and vegetables, would you become... Oh, you were asking your question before that.
Yeah.
Okay, Brother Mario.
I have a question, and what my thought on that is, if you eat fruit and don't eat vegetable, would that make you holy? Because if you eat it and it defiles you, make you become sinful, that means you can eat something and it makes you become holy. If you eat the right stuff, does it make you become holy? That's my question. And I think that Christ there is differentiating the man from the body. The man can be defiled, but we know that food does not directly defile the man as what he's making the man to be, as opposed to the body.
Elder Jeff?
Well, maybe everyone in this room, if they mixed fruits and vegetables and they knew that there was counsel against it, would defile themselves from doing so. But if someone didn't know that that was a principle in the spirit of prophecy, and they ate fruits and vegetables, then it wouldn't defile them. It may have a negative impact on their body, but as far as being profane, the Lord wouldn't look at them as profane because it's based upon light. It's all about a choice. For us, it would be a choice against His will. That's what defiles us.
So, if we eat fruit, maybe I'll give a different example. You've got a vehicle, and this vehicle is your body, and you're inside, and you go to the gas station No, you go to a garage and you need an oil change and you're low on funds, you've got two options. You can either put natural or fully synthetic. What would you go for? Fully synthetic, because that's what the spec of the car says. But what if you're short on cash and it needs an oil change? What would you do? You do your oil change with the cheaper oil? Have you become defiled? Is the car defiled?
Yeah, it'll wreck it if you put regular oil once it's had synthetic oil in it.
So if you wreck the car, it's not going to last the 10 years that it's designed to. It'll last 5 years. So all you need to do is just get a new car. Don't you? I mean, if you wreck the car, what difference does it make? Doesn't drive as well, doesn't do what you want it to do properly, but at the end of the day, you just get a new car. I mean, is it such a big deal?
If you're low on funds.
Sorry?
If you're low on funds, yeah.
No, I mean, slow fun. You need an oil change because you're going to destroy the engine in ASAP, so you need to change the oil. So do you go for a cheaper oil, or do you go for a fully synthetic which you can't afford, and for knowing full well that you're going to shorten the life of the car? I think that's what this issue is about. Then when you eat fruit and vegetables, all you do is put in low quality oil into your body, but it doesn't defile you, because after 70 years it's not a big deal, because you'll just get a new body afterwards, won't you? I mean, isn't that why after the flood God says no more synthetic oil? Everybody has to put the cheapest oil they can so that the cars don't last as long, and they start reducing in longevity rapidly. So were all those people defiling their bodies as they were shortening their lives, putting oil in that is wrecking them? I think Brother Larry, did you have your hand up? Oh, Brother Jonathan, Brother Mario. Oh, he said no.
Well, but on the other side, when you have your car and you go to the gas station and you have a diesel engine and you fill it up with petrol.
It'll work for about 20 meters.
Yeah.
Won't it? I mean, it'll start up, it'll go for a little bit, and it'll just, I mean, so the worst thing you put into it, the quicker you'll wreck it. But you're still fine. You just say, I'll just get a new car. Sorry?
Get a tow truck.
I mean, depending on how bad the mixture is, what you're actually putting in there. I mean, if you got a potent cup of coffee, I don't know how many grams of coffee that you need to get enough caffeine, it could kill you within minutes. I mean, if you in your car, if you put 10% diesel in a petrol car, it still function. Shake a bit, not, you know, but the more the ratio changes, the worse it becomes. Because you can live a whole lifetime having a cup of coffee every day, and you'll live just as long as everyone else, plus or minus a year or two perhaps, wherever you're going to look at that. But if you start increasing that caffeine content, caffeine's potent enough to kill you in a single sitting, if you had enough of it. And I don't think it takes that much. Brother Mario, Brother Bob.
I think the illustration that you use here is something that probably for years has caused a tug and a war between vegans and persons who eat a certain way. And Paul deals with the same issue. There are certain things that Sister White tells certain people in certain areas that it's okay for them to eat. And she counsels that those things that she has given sanction for those persons to eat, that we should abstain from them. So those persons that are eating those things, is it that she's saying that they should eat it and become defiled? And those persons who are not eating it, they are not being defiled. It's an unfair statement. And the next point that I wanted to bring up is going back to the same point that Christ fully understands the separation between the body and the man. What we eat, if we eat all good, and this is a theory that the what you call that kind of people in the world, New Age movement has. They believe in eating exceptionally well, and they believe that how they eat, they'll glow, and it will make them go on a higher level or a higher sphere. Does what you eat make you become holy? Does it bring you closer to God? Does fasting make you holy? All these exterior things, does that affect the man or the body?
Rob?
Your example of the vehicle, with the person in the vehicle, speaks loudly to the fact that you're in the vehicle, but the vehicle isn't you. You're not the vehicle. And I look at the body, and the physical body that we have is not who we are.
Right.
So just like he just said, you know, the man, you identify the man or the person is separate from their body. And we're talking about the man here, this defiled, not the body.
My understanding is the reason we don't eat fruits and vegetables is because when they produce, if I just say, you know, a bad chemical reaction in your body and they produce toxic byproducts, those things stop your body functioning properly. And those things that stop your body functioning properly, they make it harder for you to operate properly, to do whatever you want to do. But they don't in and of themselves defile you, because if they defiled you, that would mean that you as a person would be sin. And I think Jesus is directly addressing this issue. I know he uses the issue of the unwashed hands to make, because that's the launching point. But people think that they can become holy by eating in a certain lifestyle. And I think Adventists have picked up onto that, and they live and believe that. And it's clearly a New Age philosophy.
Yeah.
You know, even within the church, I've heard many people say milk, cow's milk, is a poison. And there are people who write books on these things. And Adventists buy into this theology that cow's milk is poison. I mean, to actually think that God would allow people to eat a poison, recommend it, just, I don't know, it just seems to me really crazy to think that God would allow us to do that. Even meat, to suggest that that's a poison, but he allows us to eat it for thousands of years.
Going back to Mark in chapter 7.
Oh, well, Larry.
Chapter 7 of Mark, verse, I believe it's 18. Are ye so, okay, so that, do ye not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him? 19, because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and then goeth out. But it cannot, things from without, entering in, cannot defile him, because it entereth not into his heart.
And the point?
I felt like I was verifying your point, that the food isn't an evil in and of itself. So it's petrol, or it's synthetic, or it's natural, either way. It's not an evil that we're consuming.
So is it okay to drink milk?
You know, when you've got a car that's really old, it has some idiosyncrasies to it. Oh, the question was, are we okay to drink milk? It has some idiosyncrasies to it, has some problems, and you need to pay special attention to a vehicle the older it gets. I think we all understand if you have an old vehicle, you can't just give the keys to someone else and expect them to drive it away. You have to tell them you need to treat in a certain way when you're going to, if it's a stick shift, you need to change the gear in a certain way. Don't press the pedal too hard. Don't thrash the engine. I don't know if you use the word thrashing. So don't accelerate too fast. You need to pay special attention to it. So at the end of the world, when your bodies are these old cars, what you could do when the car was young, you can't do to the car when it's old.
You can, but it breaks faster.
Sorry?
You can, but it breaks.
Yeah, you can. And it breaks really fast. To the degree that, you know, instead of surviving till you're 60 or 70, like your grandparents might, you start getting problems when you're 6, 7 and 8. We now can get type 1 diabetes and all the other things. You begin to really hurt your body in a way that it wasn't doing that same damage, you know, generations ago. So of course you can do what you want. It doesn't defile you. It just makes living a lot harder now because we've got much older vehicles. It's not a health class, and it's not a recommendation to eat fruit and vegetables or anything. I mean, that's not the point I want us to make. I want to make, but I want us to see that if you don't separate the physical from the spiritual, you end up falling into the trap of the Jews. And many Adventists are falling into this reform trap because it becomes salvation by food or drink or action or with works. But this is not a call for liberalization and say you can do what you want, but it's not defiling. Brother Larry.
Well, it's not what we eat, but it's our appetite. It's our diseased appetite is what you're referring to.
Yes.
Sense. So then I have a good quote here. It's in CD 3:5.2 and 3. Council on Diets, but it says, no mere restriction of your diet will cure your diseased appetite. God's plan with you is to begin at the very seat of all difficulties, the heart. And then from out of the heart will issue the principles of righteousness. The reformation will be outward as well as inward.
Amen.
Those councils on diets and foods, 35.2 and 3.
Coming back to Adventist Home 127, the lower passions have their seat in the body and work through it. So we're building up a model that says the physical is not the body, it is the lower passions. Or powers. He uses the word passions to direct you to what we're dealing with when it talks about the lower part of our nature. The fact that it's called lower means it should be at the bottom, not at the top. And they have their seat in the body, so we've discussed all of this before. So the seat is the throne. There's an intimate connection between the body, the physical structure that we have, and what she's going to identify as the lower passions. And they work through it. The words flesh, fleshly or carnal lust embrace the lower corrupt nature. So now she's talking about the lower corrupt nature. She's using the same thing, it's repeat and enlarge. So she's got lower passions is lower nature. But she's going to say this lower nature is corrupt. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. We'll do that in a moment. We are commanded to crucify the flesh with the affections and lusts. So the crucifixion of the flesh is what? It's this thing, isn't it? These lower passions, these are what need to be crucified. And she's going to explain that. She says, how do you do that? How do you crucify the flesh, the affections and the lust? Is it by inflicting pain on the body? That's not the way you do it. No, but to put to death the temptation to sin. The corrupt thought is to be expelled. So can you have thoughts in this part of the being? Let's read it again. The words flesh, fleshly or carnal lust embrace the lower corrupt nature. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. We are commanded to crucify the flesh. So you're going to crucify the flesh, and then it says the corrupt thought is to be expelled. So you're expelling the corrupt thought, and you're crucifying the flesh or the corrupt nature, where would the corrupt thought come from? From a corrupt nature, wouldn't it? So I'm suggesting that this part of the being can have thoughts. Sister Levine, you said no. Have you changed your position? Okay, have a think and then get back. Does anybody else have an objection to that? That the lower corrupt nature, the flesh, has corrupt thoughts?
How?
Sorry?
How?
How do we have thoughts?
How does that have thought?
I don't know how. I'm just reading what it says. Unless you read it, tell me how you read that differently.
Where are you though?
Adventist Home 127, paragraph 2. You find it, then Brother
Just
Nathan.
thought you had mentioned.
Middle of the quote.
Sorry?
Middle of the quote.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that the physical is the part that at the fall became corrupt, and the intellectual and moral not so. Isn't this kind of mixing intellectual and what we're defining as the physical right now? We're saying one is corrupt and the other isn't.
I guess my question is, where do we have thoughts? Are we suggesting thoughts only reside here? I guess that's what you're saying by that statement.
No. Well, I'm not saying that I disagree that the physical has thoughts, but it looks like we have thoughts here and here.
Yeah.
And if that's so, how can one be corrupt and the other not? I'm just trying to marry that thought, I'm trying to understand that.
Okay, so I'm not trying to deal with everything in one go. I'm just saying, just reading from this passage, those thoughts are corrupt. So are those corrupt thoughts contextually dealing with this or this? Just the context of the paragraph. Because to suggest that corrupt thought came from somewhere else, I think would not be reading the passage as she's written it, because it's all about the flesh all the way through. Then she calls it, we'll read it again. The lower passions have their seat in the body. So it's lower passions. The word flesh, fleshly or carnal lust are all three synonyms for the word or the phrase lower passions. I think we all agree on that. All of those embrace the lower corrupt nature. So she's going to use another phrase. She's using phraseology after phraseology to describe the same thing. They're all repeating enlargements. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. We are commanded to crucify the flesh with the affections and the lusts. So again, this flesh is the same thing. How shall we do it? Shall we do something to the body? No. But what we're supposed to do is put to death the temptation to sin. The corrupt thought is to be expelled. Sister Antonisha?
I get you.
You agree with that then? Okay. Elder Jeff?
If I read the Bible, my mind is responding to God's word and I will have a thought. But if I'm suddenly angry because someone's called me a name, there's a thought that's generated that comes from my emotional system. So I think your senses can produce thoughts, cause and effect. And those thoughts can come from the lower nature as well as the mind. But I'll let you carry on.
So, is that agreeing with what I've just said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Brother Tyler?
Sister White talks about, not in this context, but she talks about higher and nobler thoughts. And if you can have a higher and noble thought, then there's a corrupt thought. So I guess there's the two types of thoughts. And I don't know where you're going to this. I don't know if you're going to put the good thought and the intellectual and the bad thought and the physical, but...
We'll do that then. If someone maybe even find it, I'll put noble thought.
either can come from either place.
Is that where you want to put the noble thought?
Yeah.
So you can't have unnoble thoughts in your higher nature?
Yes, you can.
I think so.
we'll leave that. I'll put it in brackets. So I'll leave it here for the moment because the suggestion is that either it goes here, so does this noble thought go here or here? And I guess part of your logic was that you also used the phrase higher.
Yeah. I'm operating off of the, maybe falsely, but the premise that in the earlier classes we identified that the other two haven't fallen. That the higher and the moral hadn't fallen, and the only fallen part of the nature was the physical.
Okay. Anybody else got their hand up? Sister Shamila?
That quote that Tyler probably is referring to is, I think this is it. CCH, Counsels to the Church, 78.5.
70.
78.5. God's ideal for his children, on the contrary, no, the religion of Christ never degrades the receiver. It never makes him coarse or rough, discourteous or self-important, passionate or hard-hearted. On the contrary, it refines the taste, sanctifies the judgment, and purifies and ennobles the thoughts, bringing them into captivity to Christ. God's ideal for his children is higher than the highest human thought can reach. He has given in his holy law a transcript of his character.
I'll pick up one point from there. Did everybody hear the word captivity? And captivity is what? Slavery. So I want to just put that one thought to one side. The reason why I'm picking this point up is to reinforce the idea that the physical here is not body, because the body cannot have thoughts. That's all I want us to see. The body can't have thoughts.
But your body can trigger many thoughts.
Yep, let me read this. It says, the lower passions have their seat in the body and work through it. So the body and this lower passions, they're connected together. So if your body feels something, you can get an emotional response. Just like if a soldier tells the king there's trouble in the land, the king reacts to that. Or if the lower passions, the king says, I'm feeling angry, then the soldier's going to go and punch somebody. So it works both ways. The senses can impact or affect this lower passion, but the lower passion ends up doing things and makes the body do what it wants, because it's the king or the ruler of the body.
Should I read that quote, or should I just move, or are we moving past it?
Which one?
The one about nobler thoughts.
Oh, is that not that?
It wasn't that one.
Okay.
Should I read it, or?
Give us the reference.
Adventist Home, AH 51.5.
Go ahead.
Okay. There are persons who for some time made a profession of religion who are to all intent and purposes without God and without a sensitive conscience. They are vain and trifling, their conversation is of a low order. Courtship and marriage occupy the mind to the exclusion of higher and nobler thoughts.
Okay, so she picked up a number of things on that one. So we won't go into that because there's a lot there. Just want to stick to this one. The lower corrupt thought is to be expelled. I'm understanding the word expelled here means to be killed, to be destroyed. And the only thing that needs to be destroyed is the flesh. And the flesh is fleshly, carnal lust, the lower nature, the lower passions. It's all dealing with this issue here. So the reason why I'm making this point is because even though in the class there are people who are watching online still haven't bought into the idea that when she says physical, it's not the body. People are still struggling with this concept. So I just want to say, to me it seems really clear, and hopefully it is becoming clearer for the rest of us. So I want to come back to this passage, and another point I want to read. Second sentence. The words flesh, fleshly, or carnal lusts embrace the lower corrupt nature. Did anybody look at that? Because flesh and fleshly are King James. But I couldn't find carnal lust in the King James. I think she's using a different Bible version. Because it's in quotation marks. So I'm pretty sure she's quoting from the Bible. Unless someone could see that. I don't know if anybody took the effort to look. It's not an issue. It's just that my understanding is she's quoting from Scripture when she does that. The words flesh, fleshly, or carnal lust embrace the lower corrupt nature. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. This last part of the sentence has thrown people. So I want to just address this issue. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. So when she says the flesh, is that the same flesh as the beginning of the sentence? Or is it a different flesh? Because she's saying this, flesh, carnal lust, equals the lower nature. Then she's got a semicolon. Then she says, the flesh cannot do something. Is this flesh here the same flesh as all of these ones? Okay, so some people are saying yes and some people are saying no. So what is this flesh then, Sister Olivine?
The body.
Okay, so Sister Olivine saying the body. So I'm flushing all the troublers out. Sister, Brother Tyler.
You can come back to this. It's not answering your question, but I found the carnal lust. It's the American Standard.
Okay, I think
American Standard.
is that okay? I think it's in other ones as well, but it's the new NAS. Yeah, I was pretty sure it was a revised version she's picking up, and it maybe all three of them are from the revised version. It's not an issue. I'm just
Peter's and then.
Yeah, this is Peter, isn't it? And these are Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not an issue. I'm just making sure that if you wanted to look, you won't find it in the King James. Sister Tamina.
If the flesh would be the body, in the next sentences it says we're commanded to crucify the flesh body with affection, lust. That would be suicide, right? I mean, if it says we're to crucify the body, or I don't think the flesh can be the body.
Okay, so we've got flesh, fleshly, carnal lust equals lower nature, semicolon, the flesh cannot, full stop. Then she says, kill the flesh.
Martin Luther has commentary on it.
We're not going to go with Martin Luther's commentary, seriously, are we?
He's got it about carnal lust, according to Galatians, or pertaining to Galatians when you're talking about fulfilling the lusts of the flesh.
I'm not asking what this means, because we know what that means.
Okay.
I'm asking what this is. Because this is in quotation marks. This is spirit of prophecy now. This is Bible. This, and this is Bible. She says these three things equals that. They're all the same thing. But then she says, semicolon, the flesh cannot do something. So I'm asking, is this flesh the body, or is it the same flesh here?
It's the same
flesh by that because of the semicolon.
Okay, so that's been my approach when we first tackled this in class. That I'm just going with.
The punctuation is telling us it's the same flesh.
I'm not that good in grammar, but it says the flesh would mean there must be somehow a relationship between the words before and the flesh.
I think we're using the grammatical critical methodology now because we're getting fixated on the grammar.
She starts with lower passions and then she goes on to say lower corrupt nature. That's the same thing. And then she says right after lower corrupt nature, the flesh.
Yeah. So what are you saying it is?
It's the lower nature.
You're saying it's the same thing?
Yes.
The way I understand it is, it says the flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. The way I understand it is that the physical by its own cannot act contrary to the will of God. It needs all three to decide against the will of God.
There you go, you've made it the body. And 2 minutes ago you said it wasn't the body.
Doesn't it say the physical is not the body?
No, I said that.
Oh.
You just said the physical cannot act contrary to the will of God.
So
That's what you just said. Sorry?
So the physical is the body?
You said, no, I don't. Did you say physical or body?
I said the physical
So you said the physical cannot act contrary to the will of God, yeah?
by its own.
Okay, so in this context, what can't act contrary to the will of God?
The lower passions.
So you're making this the body or not? Because I thought you just developed an argument that it's the body.
No, it's for example the temptation, the desire to do sin by itself cannot make us go against the will of God. We also need to make the decision.
Brother Mario?
I'm sharing the thought that flesh is the body.
Speak up.
He says the flesh is the body.
That the flesh on that side, because it says that this can't do anything without it being told what to do.
I guess what I find interesting, troubling, worrying or whatever, is people have got a reading what she says here and making some kind of application about what they think she's saying and trying to make it fit with their model. What I'm suggesting is this, maybe it's too strong a statement, that people are bringing their preconceived ideas to the Bible, or inspiration in this case, and not letting inspiration change them and directing them about what it's trying to tell them. I don't know what one of William Miller's rules is, but I think it's breaking it. We're supposed to let the Bible or inspiration do its work upon us. And one of the things we all know about repeating in large, about structures and things. Why would Ellen White do all of that, structure it this way? What's she trying to teach us? Brother Luke.
I believe the conclusion we came to in class a few weeks ago was that the flesh is the affection, or the feeling, desires, the passions, the emotions. So then it can't be the body, is the conclusion we came to.
Yes, this one here, everyone's going to agree with you on that. All of these emotions, these passions, etc. But now we want to change this one. And the reason we're changing that is because of the rest of the sentence. The rest of the sentence is making us change that definition, as opposed to allowing just the sentence to read as written, just grammatically the structure of it. So I saw your hand. We already discussed this, so this is like my bad English class. What is the semicolon used for? It's to what? Okay, so it's a run-on sentence. I don't know, maybe if you express it that way. Do you use that phrase, run-on sentence? Yeah. Or has another purpose. No, I mean just sort of the proper way of grammatically you would do it. What's the purpose of a comma? It separates two thoughts, but commas are also used to create lists in a sentence. You're going to have a list, yeah? So if you said John, Mark, Peter, that would be a list of people. So if you don't have just John, Mark, Peter, if you have a little phrase, not just a singular word, so if you have a phrase, then you don't use commas, you use semicolons. So semicolons have a purpose of breaking sentences up into lists, but the other one they do is to do run-on sentences. And a run-on sentence is two separate sentences that you want to join together. So if you had a statement here and a statement here, and you put a full stop, two separate sentences can stand by themselves. So why would you swap it from a full stop to a semicolon? What's the purpose of that? Because you want to tell the people these two sentences are not just two separate thoughts, they're intimately connected one with another. And you're directing them to that. Because if you just put a full stop, you might think they're two separate thoughts. But the semicolon is, as the author is directing you specifically to say, this is the same thing. You could put a comma in there if you wanted to, but it begins to become clumsy. I know all about clumsy writing habits, lots of commas. I'm trying to say here that this and this are two separate sentences, but Ellen White, by putting the semicolon, is telling us that this is a continuation of this thought. Same thought. And if it's the same thought, then this flesh has to be the same flesh. In fact, that's the premise of her argument. The premise of her argument is that all of this is this.
So it's not the body then?
Yeah, I said body because that's what people said. Okay. And I'm saying it's not the body. If you made it the body, you're going to have so many problems, which is the things that we've already discussed about just in this class, about the oil in the car, cow's milk is a poison, all of those things you have to then introduce, and you come up with a really strange theology which Adventists have, which the Jews had, didn't they? Didn't the Jews have this strange theology? Yeah? That the reason why people have got some kind of disease. So if you were diagnosed with diabetes, first thing you're going to say to the person is what?
You can control it by diet.
Yeah, or what sin did you do? You must have been doing some sin. I mean, depending on how, we might not say it directly to them, but we'd be saying it to someone else. They must have done something wrong. I heard someone say, this person can't have cancer. You know, they're not feeling well. Can't be cancer because they hadn't been diagnosed yet. Because cancer is the curse. And you only get the curse if you've done some kind of sin. So, getting the diagnosis of cancer is the direct curse of God that you are morally corrupted, that you've become. This is people who believe this. This was someone on the Message. What is? I don't know. I mean, this is not sort of far away weirdo Adventism. This is amongst us. People have these thoughts and ideas, and I'm not being critical about the person who said that. I'm just saying it's based upon wrong models. And if you run down the road that you say this is the body, you're going to cause yourself so many problems. So the flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. So if this flesh is all of this, the lower passions, the powers, everything, cannot act contrary to God's will. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. Yeah? I didn't mean to correct. I'm just saying I take the itself off. because I'm not sure if that's even doing anything. It says, the flesh cannot act contrary to the will of God. So, so if I took the itself out, because people might say something, I'm saying the flesh, our lower corrupt nature, cannot do anything against God's will. It doesn't have the ability to. Sister Shamila.
You were saying about how people would say it's a sin to eat. Someone's committed sin, that's why they have the disease or health issue they have. Sister White does say that the 10 Commandments and the health laws are the same. So it would be a sin then, wouldn't it? If we break the health laws of health, then she equals them both as the same.
I don't know if she equals it, but she said that if you break the health laws, you're more likely to break the moral laws. I've read that.
But she likens them as the same.
Okay, so what's the point you're making by that? That that's against what this is saying, or in agreement with what it's saying?
Some who are watching may be thinking that, because you mentioned that if someone
What are you thinking? Are you agreeing that, are you saying that statement, she says the health laws are like the 10 Commandments. If you break them, you're going to sin.
It does have a part to play when we don't obey the health laws, then we're defiling the body, the physical. I'm not going to say physical body.
The body is the physical, because the body is not the lower corrupt nature. She distinguishes that in this body.
But not body.
Yeah, but you just said it defiles the body. So I'm going to take you back to Mark 7.
The body. Yeah.
This stuff is ingrained in us. So so I don't mind that you don't agree, but what you've just said is that you don't agree with all of that stuff that we've just taught, because you've got a spirit of prophecy quite tucked in the back of your mind that says, you drink cow's milk, you're defiling the body, and it's sin. Defiling something is sin.
So when we hear about the temple of God, what is it? The body is a temple of God. That's what the Bible says. So how do we define that?
Brother Larry. Elder Jeff.
Review and Herald, January 2nd, 1900, paragraph 3. So Review and Herald, January 2nd, 1900, paragraph 3. Says, disease never comes without a cause. The way is first prepared and disease invited by disregarding the laws of health.
Elder Jeff, then I'll...
It seems that like they're both touching on a correct principle, but it's not addressing your point. Your sin isn't the milk going into your body. Your sin is choosing to drink the milk against God's revealed will.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You do?
I agree with the disobedience to the will of God. So it's not the milk in and of itself, it's the disobeying the laws of health. That's what the point I was making.
It's just because you said defiling the body.
Yeah, I mean the disobedience is defiling us. It's not the...
Doesn't defile the body though. Disobedience doesn't defile the body, does it?
Okay, so
Because isn't that what Jesus says?
Yes, he does.
I'm not trying to force you into a corner. No, I'm not trying to force you into a corner, because if you have a point, because other people have this same issue. Brother Jonathan.
My question would then be what Jeff said, can you separate it, those two things, the decision I drink milk and then the act I drink milk? Because if you can't, then drinking milk is sin. And you defile your body. That's the way how I understand it.
So if you're in the army and your sergeant tells you to do 20 push-ups, if you don't do that, what are you doing? You're disobeying. But the 20 push-ups in and of itself are not good or bad. It's the command that I think is what the issue that we're having to deal with when it becomes sin. Because sin is rebellion, is disobedience. Whether you did the press-ups or not isn't going to make any difference. The issue is whether you're going to listen or not. Isn't it? Because drinking milk can't be sin.
So you're saying drinking milk is not sin?
Okay, is committing adultery sin? So are there some situations, some context in which you can commit adultery and it wouldn't be sin? So is there some context that you can drink cow's milk under? Some situations?
Maybe.
Not even maybe, you know there are.
Yeah.
Because we have counsel that says that. So the issue of drinking milk becomes a contextual issue. But all of those moral commandments, you can't say it's okay to steal sometimes under certain situations.
But I hope I understood you correctly, but this would mean if we stick to the example of drinking milk, and this is you have to consider it contextually, this would mean what about the person who has to drink milk, so he's sinning?
According to your model, but according to my model it isn't.
Okay, that's what okay.
My model is, if you put cheap oil in, your car's not going to last long. But the best plan is, the handbook says put the good quality oil in. Why would you not want to do that?
Because I have no money?
Yeah, so I'm saying you're a liar. You have plenty of money, but you want to use that money for other purposes. You spend your money on that which is not bread. So you've got plenty of money because you want to buy branded clothes. So instead of buying branded clothes, you should be buying proper food and cutting out the milk. So the problem now comes to an issue of lying, of why you're using cheap quality food. But if you tell me, genuinely, all I can afford is cow's milk because it's so cheap, half the price of soya milk, whatever you're drinking, then I'm saying, okay, that's a legitimate reason. But if the reality is that you're lying to me, that you've got plenty of money, you could afford to eat and drink and live properly, it becomes a different argument now. That's what I mean by contextually. In the West, you can't live like someone in a third world country. They have to operate on a different basis because they've got a genuine excuse because they can't afford to live the way we do. Ellen White's clear on this issue. She says if you've got nuts, fruits and grains and vegetables, particularly nuts and fruits in abundance, she says she doesn't say use the word allow, but I'll add that bit in. You're not allowed to eat meat, or there's no necessity to it. There's no excuse. Because these things replace that. But if you don't have an abundance of nuts, fruits, grains and vegetables, if you don't have that option and all you've got is a cow and a field of grain, that's how you live. But once you pull yourself out of that situation, then you're on a better job that can buy better fuel. Mm-hmm. But if you get that better job and you say, actually what I want to do is buy a better sofa or get some paint on my house, now you're lying. Because we want to spend our money on things that we're not supposed to. Sister Kathy.
Back to the issue of, we have a tendency to call people health deformers because that's what their whole thought is health in these aspects. But and we know that what we that the health laws are important as Ten Commandments, yes. But do we, as Christians, count, when we're so apt to say to somebody, oh, you got cancer, you've sinned, do we take into consideration 6,000 years of sin, what's in the air that we breathe now, the food that we buy is so perverted, and do we just stick to the letter of the law and say when somebody gets sick that it's their fault?
I think we misapply, I'm not saying Sister Miller was, but we misapply the quotes that say the health laws are on the same level as the moral law, that we should treat them the same. And my understanding is it's the issue of rebellion that's been addressed here, not an issue of the health itself. Drinking cow's milk in and of itself is poisonous, that will produce cancer and all the implications of that. I just want to pick up this one issue. If we're talking about the equality of the moral and the health, and we're saying they're on an equal footing, I'm saying there needs to be an understanding of the relationship between these, and we've just had a discussion on that. But what I want us to think about is also the prophetic. Which is where we're supposed to focus on, I think. We're supposed to be experts on this. What is the relationship between the prophetic and the moral? And I'm using the health as a launching pad, because I don't want to discuss the health. And I think I've made the point I wanted to about the health. But if we're going to make these on inequality, then how do we factor in prophetic law, if you like? Like, this is the health laws, there's prophetic laws, and are these on the same footing as the moral? Because isn't that what we teach?
You say Miller's rules are on the same level as the Ten Commandments?
If we want to use that phrase prophetic to make it William Miller's rules, then yes. Or if it's just simple dates, the conclusion of William Miller's rules. Because I guess William Miller's rules would be the methodology, and so the methodology of how you put a cookie together in and of itself isn't the law. It's when you put them all together, if you come to the wrong conclusion that it's good or bad, then that would be what the law would be. So the prophetic, his laws themselves, his rules, bring you to a place that you say either the 25-20 is correct or it's not. And does that concept get elevated to the stature of the Ten Commandments? So if you lie, will you die? If you don't believe the 25-20, will you die?
In certain contexts.
What do you mean by that?
I was asking.
To deny the Bible.
I was just asking
True.
for Jonathan to finish his thought before.
You reject truth, and if you reject truth, then you go into darkness. If you go into darkness, you die.
Why did you not follow all through that logic about here? Just like, yes. Why do we have to sort of reject the truth? You go into dark. Why have you got all those steps here? Why have you got those steps here? Those complicated steps?
Because the Ten Commandments say, don't lie, and it's transgression of the law, it's sin. But the 25-20, it's not on the surface. People like
Sorry, is that on the surface?
Yeah, but it's not like there's no command, or there's not an 11th command that says believe the 25-20.
No, this is not number 11. This is number 5 or something. I thought we taught that these are the Ten Commandments, these two charts.
Yeah.
Okay, if you see it in that sense.
No, I'm not asking you how I see it, I'm asking how you see it. Because I think this is what we teach, but it's not what we really believe.
Okay, I see the point. If you the real two tables are a type of those two. Okay, I understand your point.
Because doesn't this say, thou shalt believe?
Uh-huh.
So why do you have to go, like if you don't believe, then you go to darkness? And why is there all those steps when you didn't do the steps with the lying?
I just wasn't.
Oh, yeah, I understand. Yeah,
about
I know I'm pushing you.
about that fact that those two are in a close relationship.
I'm only using it because other people are thinking things, or on the video. The people really still don't believe that. Because only people on the message watch these videos. No, actually they don't. That we don't process this in the same way as we process this. And I'm just trying to challenge our thinking that why aren't we processing this? Why don't we just say it's the 25-20? Everybody understands what lying is. Everybody understands what the 25-20 is. It's just 4 numbers. It's 4 numbers that someone came up with, they put on a chart, and they say believe it or don't believe it. Because you're not asking me, can you define what lying is? Is it lying or is it not lying? Let's get into a complicated argument about that.
If I talk like my Adventist friend would talk, it's like we got trained in a moral sense or in a moral way, in a moral gospel, but we didn't get trained in a prophetic way. So that's all our mind Adventist mindset.
Okay, and the reason why I'm bringing that point up is because when we get the health and we elevate it to the standard of the moral, we misuse that one as well. And we say, now, if you drink cow's milk, you're defiling the body and you are lost because you've committed sin, and good on you if you get diabetes, type 1 diabetes, for drinking cow's milk and it destroys your pancreas and all of that stuff. Because you deserve it, because it defiled your body. That's how we approach that one, in a wrong way, as opposed to just saying, if God says do it, do it. I mean, go to the 4th commandment. Why is the 7th day so special compared to the 1st or the 6th? What's so unique about that? Because they're all the same, aren't they? You just go through cycles of 7, it could be cycles of 8. He invents something that he wants to invent, God, and he just says, now do it. I mean, there's nothing inherently special about Saturday compared to Sunday, only because God says he makes it special. I mean, if the whole Bible had said he rested on the 6th day, this whole argument would be about Friday, not Saturday. So it's arbitrary in that sense. But we don't approach the health in the same way, like just obey, and don't argue. My argument is, what's the problem with adultery? I can't even understand what the issue about adultery is. The whole of, like 99% of creation commits adultery, and they've been functioning perfectly well. In fact, they get on better than we do with each other. So why are we unique? Why are we not allowed to do that? Why can't we have multiple partners? What's so special about us? Whatever the answer is, we're just supposed to do it. And it's the same with the health. I think that the reason why Ellen White's going to bring these two in equality is not to say that there's so much crime about doing things. It's the fact that you're just supposed to obey. And I'm saying, in our message, aren't we supposed to be doing that at this prophetic level? You're just supposed to obey. It's not an intellectual discussion about, can you tell me what the longest and last prophecy is in the Great Controversy before I go out and battle with people? Because we don't do that on any other of these moral issues. I'm sure nobody here understands why you can't eat rabbits or camels or horses. If you're going to the chemical, we don't know that, but we just do it. Brother Larry.
Oh, I was just going to say that it is truth that if we lie, we die. If we don't repent. It is truth that the 25-20 is found in the Bible. And Matthew 4:4 says, man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So then your point is we should be doing the same with health.
My point is, I'm not trying to have a health discussion here. I'm trying to actually not promote health. I'm trying to minimize the health message to say that, only in the sense not that we shouldn't follow the laws, is to say that the purpose of the following of those laws is to make sure the car works properly to do the job that it was designed to do. But in and of itself, it's not defiling, and unless you separate the body from this lower corrupt nature, you're always going to fall into the pit that you're sinning by doing some activity or by eating something. And then you look at other people in the same way and you lose the ability to understand what the sin problem is.
So that's back to the appetite then.
Yeah, it's back to the statement that you made. Sister Tamina, Sister Terry, Brother Tyler, I don't know if we'll get through all of those people with.
I was just going to say, can you say, since the health message is the right arm of the gospel, and we know the gospel is a prophetic gospel, that the health message is a great tool to help the gospel we are proclaiming. But the body can live without the right arm, but an arm cannot live without the body.
Yeah, this is not an exercise. I know people are going to criticize of diminishing the role of the health message or the reform message. It's not that. It's to understand that in the threefold nature of man, we need to separate the physical from the spiritual. And I'm suggesting Ellen White's doing that. And then what happens is people have quotes or theories or ideas that begin to challenge that. And I'm saying, I think it all fits. Sister Terry.
That sentence there where it says the flesh of itself, isn't that of itself important? If the flesh cannot act contrary to the will of God of itself, can it act contrary to the will of God with some help from the intellectual and moral?
I think that's the point. But I wanted to take the of itself out just to make the point that the flesh cannot act contrary to the will of God.
On its own.
It's our own will.
But that's like saying, can your fingers act contrary to the will of God? But if I say, see?
Of themselves.
Yeah, so I want to distinguish this issue that the lower, this flesh, and I believe it's the lower corrupt nature, cannot act contrary to the will of God. It needs assistance. And so it is with our hands, our body. The body has similar characteristics. That's why people are putting the body into this, because they can see the body in and of itself, because we've already discussed it, but it's not that.
So it's what's assisting it that we need to deal with.
Yes. Brother Mario.
You can discuss.
Okay, so all I want to pick in closing is, so we'll just summarise, we've got the threefold nature of man. You can have corrupt thoughts. He says corrupt thoughts. It's not the body, it's the lower passions and powers. And we haven't discussed this, but I've noted it here. It's dealing with the lower nature, which is corrupt. We've hopefully broken this sentence up to understand that this semicolon is showing us that this flesh is the same flesh as this one. And this flesh is the lower nature and it's not the body. So this flesh here is not the body. And it says the lower corrupt nature cannot of itself go contrary to the will of God. And most of us, many of us, wherever the number is, we in our daily lives are acting contrary to the will of God. And who are we blaming for that? I'm saying what we're blaming is this phrase here, but we call it sinful nature. And I want us to pick up this idea of nature. Take out the word full. We sin because it's our nature. That's the theology that we end up going down if we're not careful. This is wrong. We don't sin because of nature. And the reason we know we don't is because the corrupt nature cannot act contrary to the will of God. It just cannot do it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we ask and pray that you would be with us and guide us. Lord, it's my hope and prayer that each of us through this day would re-examine the conversation that we've had this morning, re-look at these passages to ensure that the truths that we're developing are in agreement and in accordance with your will. We hope and pray, Lord, that the truths that are being discussed are leading your people in the right direction. When it comes to the issue of our nature, how we're supposed to deal with this nature, and the rights and wrongs of health reform. Please be with us and please guide us through this day. We ask and pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.